All right, well, I guess I'll start with introductions here for this next conservation conversations. I appreciate all of you coming today. I think this will be a fascinating, interesting one for everyone. So I would like to introduce Kristy Smith, the Conservation District's Natural Resource Technician. Kristy has a degree in environmental science and has worked with various nonprofit agencies through AmeriCorps to monitor watershed habitat and sagebrush ecosystems in California, Nevada, and Wyoming. She moved to Wyoming in the summer of 2018 to continue habitat assessment and fell in love with the landscape and remoteness of western Wyoming. She is currently working towards a master's GIS certificate from Utah State University and is this year's Wyoming Native Plant Society president. So I'll let Kristy take it away. Thanks for being here.
All right. Hello, everyone. Let me know if you can't hear me. So today I'm going to be talking about fungal facilitation, the symbiotic relationship of mycorrhizal fungi to sagebrush ecosystems. I'm going to talk about what mycorrhizae are, how they work, the different types of mycorrhizal fungi, where they occur in sagebrush ecosystems. I'm going to cover a case study that looks at the ways that disturbance affects mycorrhizae in sagebrush ecosystems. And then last, I'm going to talk about how mycorrhizae applies to you. So the definition of mycorrhizae is a mutualistic symbiotic relationship between fungi and plants. And the word mycorrhizae means fungus root. And this refers to the role that the fungus plays in the plant's root system. This type of fungi has been around since the first plants evolved 500 million years ago, and they are associated with 90% of land plants. In this interaction, plants supply the fungi with sugar and carbon in exchange for water and nutrients, and carbohydrates that are left over from photosynthesis are given from the plant to the fungi, and then water and minerals such as phosphorus, iron, and nitrogen are given from the fungi to the plant. This interaction is known to help improve the nutrient status of the host plant. It increases the water absorption of the plant and helps with growth and disease resistance. And in exchange, the plant gives the fungus the perfect medium to grow in. The fungus will take over the plant's root system either intracellularly or extracellularly. And intracellularly means that it will actually penetrate the plant's root system, and extracellularly meaning that it covers the outside of the root system. So I have a nice little video that gives a good visual representation of how this happens on the landscape.
Many different species live in the forest, some closer than others. Fungi usually grow close to certain plants. This can only be explained by taking a look under the earth. This is where the fungus, in the form of a huge network of threads called the mycelia, runs through the earth and connects with the root system of neighboring plants, in this case, a beech tree. Innumerable threads create a dense network around the tree's outermost fine roots. Through the widely branched mycelium, the fungi can very efficiently absorb water and minerals, including phosphorus and nitrogen, and through the individual threads, transport them straight into the tree roots. From there, the water and minerals are transported into the leaves. In the cells of the leaves, photosynthesis takes place, creating dextrose from water, carbon dioxide, and the sun's energy. So much dextrose is produced that it's more than enough for the whole beech tree. What is left over, which can be up to a third, is transported underground. For fungi, this process is essential for survival, as they themselves cannot produce any dextrose. This form of symbiosis is called mycorrhizae, and there are advantages for both partners. The fungi helps the tree to absorb water, and in return, it gets dextrose to survive and grow. In the root system of a tree, there can be more than 30 types of mycorrhiza fungi. They create a network between the trees. Via this fungal connection, a strong tree can supply its weaker neighbors with nutrients. Some mycorrhiza fungi can even coexist with many different plants, an ingeniously designed underground network.
So as that video kind of demonstrated, this interaction helps to make nutrients more readily available to plants by breaking them down into more usable components. It is essential in areas where soils are deficient in water and certain types of nutrients. There are many benefits to mycorrhizae in the soil. They help with water and nutrient storage for the plants, so it acts as kind of a reserve. And leftover organic matter from this interaction contributes to soil structure and nutrient content that can be used by soil microorganisms and other plants. And while doing research for this, I learned that there's actually a type of predatory fungi in the category of mycorrhizae, and they will actually attract and capture nematodes, and that is a type of roundworm found in the soil. They can either be predatory towards plants by eating their roots, or they can be beneficial by contributing nutrients. And so this type of fungi will target these parasitic nematodes, capture them, eat them, so they get nutrients, and then the plant in return is protected from these parasites. Okay, where's that? So this interaction helps to make, move on to the next part. This fungus, it wants to get the most bang for its buck. So it's going to associate with plants that already have a lot going on for them. It's going to want to link up with plants that are tolerant to different soil types and different types of soil conditions. It's going to associate with plants that have strong roots with lots of branching, so there's lots of good surface area for it to attach to. It's also going to want to link up with plants that are efficient photosynthesizers, so it can get the most nutrients in exchange of this relationship. And it also will want to link up with plants that are resistant to a wide range of different pests and insects. This fungi, it associates with both annual and perennial plants, but perennials seem to respond more favorably to this colonization. So it can interact with both. You can definitely find it in both types of plants. It just seems to be a little bit more effective in perennials. There are two different types of mycorrhizae. There's ectomycorrhizae and endomycorrhizae, and this distinction is based on the location of the fungal hyphae, or the root system of the fungus, in relationship to the root tissue of the plant. So ectomycorrhizae is the less common of the two. The word ecto means outside of, and this refers to the hyphae outside of the plant root system. And so the hyphae will attach between the host cells and cover the plant's root tip, and all of that branching will form what's called the Hardig net, which you can see up there. And this is where nutrient and water exchange occurs between the fungi and the plant. The other type of mycorrhizae, which is much more common, is endomycorrhizae. The word endo means within, and this refers to the way that the hyphae actually penetrate and infect the plant cell wall and become part of the cell. So they don't form fruiting bodies like a typical mushroom. They form propagules, which are found in the soil amongst the root system of the plant. These propagules are filled with spores and are how the mycorrhizae is able to grow. So the roots of the fungus will actually digest parts of the cell wall and then grow into a tube-like structure within the cell membrane. They also form sac-like structures called arbuscules, which provide lots of good surface area for that exchange of nutrients and water. And so vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizae is one type of endomycorrhizae, and that's the one I'm going to be talking about most. So this type of fungus is the most widespread and is associated with 70 to 80% of land plants, so there's a lot of them. The hyphae enter the roots and create swellings for nutrient storage and structures where the nutrient exchange occurs. So the vesicles are where the storage occurs, and the arbuscules are where the actual exchange happens. And then, so the two structures, arbuscules and vesicles together, give you vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizae, which is a pain to say. All right, so this type of fungus is especially good at helping plants get nitrogen from the soil. It benefits the plants and also supports nutrient cycling. It helps legumes better acquire nitrogen from the soil. And we have a legume up here. Legumes are a family of plants that produce pods with seeds inside. There are legumes that you eat, different types of beans, and then legumes that you might find out in nature, like alfalfa or lupin. Legumes are able to take nitrogen from the soil and change it into a usable form, and this is called nitrogen fixation. They do this with a specialized root system called nodules, and this is where that nitrogen transformation occurs. And you can see up there, those weird little knobby things are all nodules. When this fungi is in the soil, legumes are able to get nitrogen more efficiently. So now that we know all about this fungus, where does it occur in sagebrush ecosystems? There are several different species of this fungus that associate with sagebrush, bunchgrass, other types of forbs, and they can also vary based on the type of soil that they occur in. Because essential nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus become less available to plants when there's low soil moisture, the process of this association is very important in helping plants in arid ecosystems such as the sagebrush steppe in acquiring these nutrients. Shrub species are an important component in rangeland systems for establishment and maintenance of this type of fungi because they're abundant, they have extensive root systems, so they're a good host for this fungus. Many of the shrub species found in sagebrush ecosystems are considered obligate mycotrophs, and this means that the plant would rarely occur in nature without this fungal association, and a lot of species actually rely on this fungus to be able to establish and survive. The fungus is most important when a seed is first growing to help it develop strong roots and also maximize the amount of nutrition it can get from the soil. The sagebrush understory is an ideal place for seedling recruitment and where soil is most likely to have this type of fungus. And so there was a case study that looked at the effects of soil disturbance on plant succession and the level of mycorrhizae in the soil. And this was conducted by faculty and research associates of Colorado State University's Department of Range Science and Department of Botany and Plant Pathology in 1976. The study area was in a sagebrush grassland range located near Rifle, Colorado, so topographically somewhat similar. The study was over the course of 5 years and looked at the effects of soil disturbance on plant succession, as well as the relationship between plant succession and mycorrhizal presence. The species that were considered in this study were big sagebrush, different types of wheatgrass, Indian rice grass, prairie June grass, different types of bluegrass, needle and thread, and cheatgrass and Russian thistle, and these last two are non-mycorrhizal species. There were 4 treatment sites, each of which had some kind of disturbance that they underwent. So each site had their vegetation mechanically removed, and then the first site had the soil was left intact. In the second site, the soil was disturbed to a depth of 30 centimeters. In the third site, the top meter of soil was removed, mixed up, and then returned to the plot. And in the last site, the first meter of soil was removed, and then the second meter of soil was also removed. They were switched and then put back into the treatment site. So after all this messing around with the soil happened, these researchers looked at the vegetation regrowth and sampled it on an annual basis. They used quadrats and randomly placed them in each treatment plot, where they monitored plant species density, above ground biomass, and percent canopy cover. And these were the results of that study. The recovery of disturbed areas to a healthy, functioning ecosystem may be slowed down if the fungi are not present. So the likelihood that mycorrhizae would thrive in the soil decreased when there was increasing amounts of disturbance. The establishment of shrubs was poor on all of the treatment sites, with the least amount of regrowth occurring on that last plot that had the most disturbance. Grass production and cover declined with soil disturbance, and this was attributed to whether the fungi were present in the soil, how fertile the soils were, the soil water holding capacity, and whether seeds were present. So not only did the productivity of the grasses drop, they also produced fewer seeds, and so the seed bank also suffered. As you can see in the graph, that first site that only had, or that didn't have any disturbance to the soil, was able to have better recovery, and then each of the other plots started to have some regrowth, but it was pretty minimal. This type of disturbance will alter the structure of the soil and lead to compaction, which reduces pore space and how much air can be held within the soil. And this may inhibit root penetration and negatively impact fungi. So the image on the right is a compact soil. The plant isn't able to get its roots very deep into the soil. And then on the left is a better aerated soil. The plant is able to branch out more, get its roots deeper into the soil, and get those nutrients and water. This study also suggests that if mycorrhizae are not present, the non-mycorrhizal species will establish first on disturbed sites, which in this case were 2 invasive plant species. Cheatgrass and other invasive non-mycorrhizal species are poor hosts because they don't have extensive root systems that these fungi really like to attach to. So the big takeaways from this study, and things to keep in mind for ecological restoration projects in terms of maintaining that soil fungi. So we know that cheatgrass is a non-mycorrhizal species, and it can affect the composition of fungi that are in the soil. And so if they are invading an ecosystem, they can change the type of fungi that are there, and this can negatively impact the sagebrush that depend on them. When non-mycorrhizal species of plants established in disturbed rangeland sites, the fungal population, again, is seen to decline. So the exact mycorrhizal fungi to plant species association isn't really well understood in this type of ecosystem, but it looks like the shift, or if there's a shift in the type of vegetation, there will be a shift in the type of fungus that is in the system. This type of fungi contributes to the host plant's ability to get minerals. It also helps with soil structure and quality, and this really helps with overall ecosystem functioning. Disturbance of arid lands significantly reduces the amount of mycorrhizae in the soil, again. And soil disturbance affects more than just this mycorrhizae. It can also dry out the topsoil. It can damage root systems of plants that are anchoring the soil in place. It can contribute to erosion, and as I was mentioning before, it can make it easier for those exotic invasive plants to establish. So how does mycorrhizae apply to you? Well, if you are a landowner, if you are a rancher, it actually plays a pretty important role in your work. It's worth noting that there is a lot of ongoing cheatgrass monitoring and treatment going on throughout the county, thanks to Sublette County Weed and Pest, the Conservation District, the BLM, NRCS, Wyoming Game and Fish, and Forest Service, just to name a few. So a lot of the land in this county is used for ranching, haying, livestock use, and other associated activities, and having healthy, intact soils will help people be able to keep doing that. So mycorrhizae in your soil will give you better yields of hay, because we know that this mycorrhizae likes to associate with bunch grasses, which our livestock like to eat. This will yield higher volumes of more nutritious food for your livestock and other animals. It also helps to maintain moisture in the soil, which is really important in low water years. And it helps with resilience to invading plant species. So if there's already a healthy fungal community in your soil, it's harder for invasive species to come and invade. And this is why it's so important to maintain the fungi that you already have. Also, if you're a gardener, mycorrhizae is your best friend. So gardeners refer to mycorrhizae as a soil food web, and this is because of the way it circulates nutrients throughout the plant and throughout the soil. 80 to 85% of edible garden crops, fruit trees, flowers, and herbaceous plants associate with this type of fungi. And because the mycelial network stores excess nutrients for later use, it increases the long-term fertility of the soil, which means you're not having to constantly amend your soil. It also lessens the risk of transplant shock. So when you're moving your starts or your small trees into your bigger plots or into your garden bed, the likelihood of that plant dying decreases if that plant was inoculated with this type of fungi. You can help to bolster this type of mycorrhizae in your garden bed by amending your soil with compost, adding mulch, planting cover crops, and using no-till methods. So in summary, mycorrhizae are beneficial to many different plant species. They're essential in providing plants with water and nutrients, especially in arid climates like sagebrush steppe, and they've been around for a very long time. Scientists are still learning about the role that they play in soil fertility and plant health, and also how different species of fungus associate with different species of plants. And that is my presentation on mycorrhizae in sagebrush ecosystems.
Thanks so much, Kristy. That's a lot of really cool information. Who has questions? I feel like there's got to be some out there. Yeah.
So recently, I'm a long-time gardener and an opponent of Roundup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's an additive in Roundup. I don't recall the name. This all filmed. It helps, supposedly helps soil composition. Do you remember the name of that compound? it's supposedly supposed to dry, take the humidity out of crops like corn, wheat, that type of thing. But how long, I can't remember how long that will stay in the soil once it's been applied to the soil.
I guess.
And the, well, I wish I could have terrible names of the component around it was sprayed, and even in the production of when they till. Does,
like phosphate? Is that what you're thinking of?
I think so, yeah.
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 It's what it's got on its main ingredient, right?
Yeah, that's just the generic or the.
I'd like to say quota. I'm like, I know I'm not pronouncing it right, but that's what.
Do you think 6 months? Is that what you said?
No, years.
Years?
I think it's
Yeah,
a few
and that's,
years.
I mean, it also gets into the water table. Glyphosate is water soluble, so it gets, you know, it can get into the water table as well, and it doesn't go away.
Right. So how does that, I wonder how does that affect the fungi?
The fungi.
That's a critical question, because if you're stopping that growth, and even with maybe some of those components, it doesn't seem to be a logical way or a reasonable way to stop that process.
Yeah. I guess I'm by no means an expert on mycorrhizae, but I would wager that it would have a negative impact on the fungi in the soil. I guess that's a really good question. Sorry, I don't have a great answer. But that's definitely something worth looking into more. I guess, are you asking about the impact to plants or more about how it would affect the fungi in the soil?
A little both, because if the fungi is
Yeah.
helping the plant growth to a certain extent, how much of that can that stop the growth? You know, if it's spreading throughout the soil, what does it do? Has been any research done on that particular component on the fungi? What does it do?
I would imagine there's research out there on that. I would also, just because from soil disruption affects mycorrhizae so much, I would imagine that having glyphosate in your soil would definitely have a negative impact on both your plants. I guess I wouldn't want to give a definitive answer, sorry. Yes.
I have a question about implementation. So are you guys going at it, I guess, implemented pest management, like biologically, chemically, like physical? Are there grazing styles? Are there other plants that you would like to encourage to grow, or no-till drill, or like how can you implement it to encourage this growth and utilizing this fungi if you already have it or don't, to make it better?
Definitely. I guess it depends on like your goal for whatever area you're working in. So for a garden, definitely no-till is really important because I guess it's like a fine line for having aeration in the soil. Like you definitely want to have pore space, but you don't want to have so much that the soil dries out because that negatively affects both the plant and the fungus. So I think no-till is a really good option for both larger acreages and for garden. Being able to have cover crops is huge, especially if you can get clover or some other type that is nitrogen fixing, because that really helps to put nutrients back into the system. Yeah, I think those are some good options.
Mine was based off more of like a grazing and
Grazing, yeah, okay.
or like I did a study on like high frequency grazing and cattle moving and how like it can help with your weeds and then also yellow flower alfalfa is like an amazing source of nutrients for everybody, soil, animals grazing it. And I was curious, like if we're already trying to implement something like that, is this a good carrier of your fungi? Like, is it bringing that source with it as well?
Definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then like you obviously like want more of an array of plants, like you said,
Yes.
complementary.
Yeah, definitely. The more diversity you can have in your plants, the better, because you'll have different types of mycorrhizae and just better soil structure, healthier soil microorganisms. Everyone's just a little bit happier.
Yeah, I think sorry to add, I think it has to do with like plant vigor, right? Like if your vigor is high, you are going to have healthier soils in general. And so I think when it comes to management, it's mainly like diversity, making sure like with the high intensity that you're not, you're allowing that growth, you're allowing plant vigor, because like any symbiotic relationship, if the host is weak, the fungi is not going to be happy because they are both benefiting each other. So if one is super weak and not readily benefiting the other, you're going to have a decrease in that relationship or a decrease in the fungi or any other microbe in the soil as well that's beneficial. So I would think anytime you can just increase productivity, plant vigor, and plant health on the landscape, you're going to be increasing or bettering your mycorrhizae. And like she was saying, like the sagebrush, like mowing sagebrush, or like removing sagebrush entirely from we know mycorrhizae attaches heavily to sagebrush, and so there's a time and place for that, of course, depending on your goals and objectives. But I don't know. I think was that kind of what you were asking about too?
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of curious, like how you can involve it in your program, whether it's through gardening or grazing animals or your little horse pasture with your goats, whatever your scale is, it's like, okay, how do I like implement this project or this fungi into my integration, which is obviously, like I was saying, it's a balance of everything depending on what you're doing. But is it like a powder, or is it in a plant form, or do you have to just, like how do you actually accumulate this fungi? Is really, I guess, what I'm asking.
There are definitely, you can buy nutrients that have mycorrhizae in them from like nurseries and such. We actually have an aerator was it no-till aerator? Was
That
it
we
called?
just got?
Yeah, you can rent. And that is really helpful for keeping nutrients in the soil and also not drying out the soil too. So that's another option.
I'm sorry. Do you offer like any, I've been looking at Nature's Seed down in Utah for like I know rice, they get their like 14 variety seed pack as well. Is that like a good thing to kind of incorporate if you're planting already?
Yeah, so Daryl Bennett here is a granite seed dealer, and Nature Seed is granite seed, so maybe Daryl could, if you have seed questions, would also be a good one for that. I mean, Kristy may know as well, but
He'll definitely know more.
Can you combine them, like when you're planting or utility drill or?
So Granite Seed sells a mycorrhizal fungi product made by Reforestation Technologies International out of California.
Oh wow. Okay.
And we've been selling it for quite a few years now. And it's incorporated into clay, so it looks like cat litter.
Oh.
And so there's suites of fungi that are geared towards, Basin and High Plains is one of them that's popular for this part of the country. And so there's different rates that you can put on, but the manufacturer recommends to get a minimum population of the mycorrhizal units or fungi, the hyphae, in order to make a substantial boost in the soil population for plant growth. And so, yeah, we sell that stuff. And so 40 pounds an acre is kind of in the middle of the road rate, and it sells for around $6 a pound.
And do people use this for like hay ground? Is it uncommon more in like ranching 6,000 acres? You're like.
So she went back to that study in 1976 at CSU out of Rifle. I haven't read that study, but that disturbance factor, I'm not sure how long soils were stored and how the disturbance entered in, but there's a question mark or a debate on soils that are stored, that are stockpiled, and how long the mycorrhizal fungi will live in that soil without having a symbiotic host with plants. And it'll live longer than once thought. But then there's two different kinds of, I don't know, Kristy, if you would if you had found in the literature the difference between the hyphae and the spores of mycorrhizal fungi that exist in the soil, and how long spores can live without a host. Did you come across any literature like that?
I didn't get into the specifics of how long they could live without a host, unfortunately, but
Apparently quite a long time.
yeah.
So that depends on where you're applying it, I'm assuming too.
Yeah.
And just a quick question, that product, is it just applied topically? It's just spread
So,
out and then?
it's
like you said,
broadcast.
It's kind of like a clay, so it's just
Yeah,
broadcast?
it looks like cat litter. You broadcast it, but you need to incorporate it lightly into the soil because if
Okay.
it stays exposed to UV sunlight, it'll kill it.
Okay.
And so you want to lightly incorporate it, but not bury it. But you want to keep it in the upper root zone.
Sure, you like somebody, for example, and might have a soil analysis done before you contact somebody to have a certain.
You'd have to have biological analysis done to find out what the population of that mycorrhizal fungi is in your soil sample. So it's not a standard analysis. And I've never done that. I guess my rule of thumb would be if you don't have any topsoil, you're trying to get plants to grow in what you know is subsoil, and your organic matter is low, and that's where your soil analysis can come in, then it would be prudent to probably consider putting mycorrhizal inoculant on that soil to get your re-veg boosted.
Because I think sometimes topsoil in Wyoming is not topsoil in.
Yeah, not very thick. So if it's stripped, subsoil, and you're trying to get plants growing, and you throw more seed at it, that's not going to fix the problem. You have other deficiencies going on. So that's where you might want to consider mycorrhizal.
So in like a prime condition, you can broadcast it out, and if you're gonna no-till, drill some variety of seed in there, like that might be perfect, because you're somewhat disturbing and getting it in there, so it's almost not, or what you said, exposure, but we're ranchers, not farmers really, so that would be like a lot more leasing equipment than I would want to do, but still, like, I've never heard of that, that's interesting. I was probably looking in the wrong area, for sure.
Well, and the district does have a no-till drill as well for rent.
Yeah, that's what you said earlier.
Yeah, and those are free to the public, and so I'm making some fact sheets right now to help kind of spread the word about those. We have a lot of equipment that's available to anyone, and it doesn't matter if you own an acre or up to, as long as you are able to find the equipment that you need to pull it, would be the only thing, the correct tractor, but that that would be an option for anyone who's interested in any type of seeding or no-till drilling. So keep that in mind for future management.
Used to work for the NRCS years ago, like 35 years, we worked for the NRCS in conjunction with, put a film out called Kiss the Ground, an excellent film about how he has changed the mindset of our farmers, ranchers, about how to do that tilling and no-till stuff. It's amazing what ranchers have done in the Midwest, even in Montana, Wyoming, how they put that application used to get better growth out of your soil. That doing sometime and look at that film is very eye-opening.
Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kristy? It's been great discussion. We have a lot of good info in the group
some
as
good
well.
feedback. Yeah.
So can I take a shovel and go out in my yard, my garden, and dig it up and see this fungus? Or is that where Daryl was saying you got to have biological analysis? Is it visible to the naked eye?
You can see it attached to plants' root systems, but as far as just being present in just like a hunk of soil, probably not, I would think.
So the root growth give you any indication, like if you just dug up a piece of brome or something and looked at that root, could it give you an indication of how much is there, or is that just something you'd have to have?
I think so. You might have to have a control to really see the difference of one that has been inoculated and one that has not, but generally speaking, I think if you have like a really robust, like a bunch grass, a really robust root system, there's a really good chance that it's been inoculated by that fungi.
Yeah, and I think the soil testing in like Sublette County is tough, right? Because you might think, oh, I need mycorrhizae, you know, and you probably do, and it's a great thing, but there are so many other soil complexities that are happening in Sublette County that I think doing a soil test and understanding what else is happening with your soil before is always good. So understanding, I mean, we have a lot of salts in this county. We have a lot of other things that might be affecting plant growth. Like I'm thinking people who are gardening are like, I can't get anything to grow, it must be the fungi. Well, you could also just have really salty soils or really clay, you know what I mean? There are so many other, you know, you want to understand your textures, you know, your salts, your pH, things like that, because there's a lot of other things in your soil that could be affecting, one, the ability for maybe fungi to like it there. I mean, we have soils in this county that can be pretty inhabitable. So it's good to, you know, just get a normal soil test done to understand your textures, what's going on in your soil, and then, you know, diving in further to the biological side, you know, okay, now I know my soil is good, maybe you've amended it, you've done what you need to get it where you want from an organic matter standpoint. Now let's talk fungi. I think that's probably a good, you know, I guess, order
And then you
of
can
operations.
have a more targeted approach with what type of fungi you use once you get that analysis done, probably. Yes.
And then I have a broader question, not regarding like specific, you know, gardens or anything like that, but like county-wide, maybe even statewide, nationally-wide. Like I know we're doing cheatgrass mitigation, you know, things like that for invasive plants. Are we, county, state, federal, are we in any way looking at our public lands, our federal lands, and trying to increase the growth of fungi in the soils? Is there anything in place right now for that? And should there be?
I mean, I think there should be. I guess I'm not entirely sure. I would guess probably not, that it's mostly focused on on control of invasives, but not to the level of trying to build the mycorrhizae in those ecosystems, I would imagine.
Is that control to the detriment of the fungi?
It could be. I guess it depends.
The cheatgrass control?
Or you mean?
Well, yeah, for example, like, yeah, the cheatgrass infusion, the cheatgrass. Are we just spraying things with Roundup that's going to kill all the fungus in the soil?
There's definitely spraying. There's also there's controlled burns that have been going on too, and that's actually can be beneficial to fungi by putting nutrients back into the soil.
Okay.
But I don't know a whole lot about the program, but Sublette County Weed and Pest has put a lot of effort into finding sprays that are not going to be harmful to native plants, and so I would hope that those are also.
Well, I would say, I mean, you did mention that cheatgrass is not a host for mycorrhizae fungi.
Yes.
So if that is the only thing that's on the landscape, your fungus is gone already, because it is not known to be a mycorrhizae host. And so therefore, if you're spraying cheatgrass to then boost perennial production of native vegetation, you are actually increasing, hopefully, the fungi, because you're providing the plant host that fungi needs.
Kind of giving it a
Right.
chance to start to
Yeah.
build up again.
Yeah.
So a healthy plant community goes hand in hand with a healthy mycorrhizae.
I mean, pretty
Yes,
much, yeah.
That's right.
definitely.
I think there are like underlying programs that aren't necessarily like for the fungi, but like, I mean, I personally work with Karen from the NRCS a lot and on our ranch and implementing things that like pay off in other ways, but also like, okay, fencing off this huge wetland, which, okay, like, there's no like paperwork, it's like, your story, carbon, good job, but initially that's the underlying thing of it. It's like you're trying to like help everything by doing one good thing, and I feel like that would, you know, okay, resting this pasture, I'm a grazing, we have animals grazing these areas, so like by just resting that and allowing that, literally biodiversity in one little ecosystem is crazy to think about. Like it's its own little ecosystem in the middle of this sagebrush, but that is probably help restoring that fungi that's in that wetland or area to, you know, I can see it year after year. Like I can see it just in the habitats and the animals returning to this place that like, obviously the feed is there, so they can return to it. So it's like, okay, like, maybe we sign up for a grant like that, and we fence off our wetlands, but you're like killing a bunch of birds with one stone. Right, I mean, I hate to say that, but you're not killing birds, but you are. You're helping everything.
Yes.
Like, it's a good way to look at it. And when you talk to other people about it, I always try to do that, so they don't think it's like, I mean, I work with a lot of crusty ranchers, and they don't like the government involved in things, and you're like, well, but if you can get paid to rest this pasture that you're already resting, like, for sage grouse, why not?
Right.
Like, or when you crunch the numbers, it's like, oh my gosh, you can run sage grouse for more than you can run cattle. Like, you're making more money doing that. And sometimes there's like an approach of like how people look at things and like, oh, this won't only help the fungi, but in your mind, you're like, yeah,
Helping the
you want
fungi.
to help your cattle, and in your return, you're helping the fungi, which is, I get it, working with both sides.
Yes, definitely.
We're all caretakers of this earth. We gotta take a better job of doing it, that's all.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes, agreed. We're all in agreement there.
Yes. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
All right.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone, for the great conversation.
you.
It's always better when there's, back and forth like
Yeah,
that.
that was nice.